Awesome. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Today I'm here again with one of the amazing guests, Mansi. So I'm super psyched for this conversation, and I'm sure everyone who's joining us live today is also as excited as me. So, without wasting time, I am going to let Mansi start with an introduction.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much, Supreet, for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and share some knowledge and hopefully help many of you listening in try to understand this field and career path better. I'm Mansi. I'm currently a technical program manager at Google. I'm working in the platforms and ecosystems organization and on a team that's dedicated towards helping kids around the world and we provide useful, fun, and enriching experiences for kids everywhere. Such a fun organization, such a fun mission. And prior to this role, I used to be a program manager at Microsoft. I was working on a team called Test Space, and that team was dedicated towards helping first and third party software companies test their applications, their desktop applications ahead of updates. So I have a background in computer science. I had a bachelor's at University of Cincinnati, and at the same time, I did my MBA as well. So both the technical and the business side of things is what I wanted to have a great foundation in. And while I was there at University of Cincinnati, I was able to do 5 internships, which really helped me understand what I wanted to do and what the industry really looks like. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background.
Awesome. So I think we'll start with your current role and then we will go to, how your life was at Microsoft. So I think this technical program manager, definitely the definition of this varies from organization to organization. But what does it entail at Google?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, as you said, it's such a wide title. It's such a wide variety of skill sets that you need. But really, at Google, am I able to communicate with my technical team? Am I able to communicate with cross-functional teams easily and effectively? Am I able to address or foresee any challenges that are coming in the future due to my technical knowledge that I have? So, for example, if we're building out a product and we're communicating and negotiating with the engineering teams that we want this project or this feature built out in the next 3 months, here are the different capabilities that we can implement in the next 3 months. It's my job to know that from a technical perspective, how long should this project take? What are the different features that should be implemented? And how much time will my engineers truly need to do this? So sometimes you go back and forth with engineering teams. Engineers say they need 6 months to do a project, and you say, okay, based off of the scope of this project, we're going to reduce some things. We're going to, keep it very time bound and keep it within 3 months. So that's really the technical component is you need to one, understand the architecture behind what you're doing so you can have these conversations, and two, you need to be able to negotiate timelines based off of your business needs, but also based off of reality of how many engineers you have on your team and what capacity really looks like for the team. So that's really what I do as a technical program manager. Is I'm in the day-to-day jobs. I'm working on a very specific product with the engineering teams, trying to make sure that we're resolving for any issues that may come up, or I'm removing any roadblocks for the engineering team.
Yeah, so it seems like combination of both tech and then again at the same time you need some sort of project management skills and business knowledge as well. So anyone who wants to become a TPM, right? Like what? I mean, there are two three things that I would like to cover here. How should they prepare for
Mhm.
it? And what are the skills that people can start kind of working early on to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone wants to come into this field, I think it's really good to have a strong technical foundation. And it doesn't have to be this 4-year college degree. That's what I chose. do, but it doesn't necessarily have to have it. You just have to be confident in your abilities, and have a good technical background, whether that is getting certification course in the specific software or technology field that you want to go into. For example, if you want to be a technical program manager in cybersecurity field, it's good to have a strong technical foundation. And then a lot of times, for any job that I've ever been in, you learn on the job. You have your coworkers, you have dedicated learning programs. So as long as you have the foundation, as long as you can speak to the skills and you have some experience, really are able to adapt a lot of the skills required for program management over from one role to another. So as a technical program manager, um, there will be times where you'll be in a room full of engineers telling you you cannot launch a product because of certain bugs, or you can't launch a product because of whatever issue. But it's your responsibility as a technical program manager to weigh the impact versus the business needs. And that's kind of the hardest part of this job. And that's why for me, I had that background in computer science and MBA as well. I have to be able to juggle the business needs and implications, as well as having a technical understanding that some things are technically feasible and some things are not technically feasible,
Hmm.
and be able to adapt to both. So those kind of skills, as well as organizational skills, being able to work on multiple projects with great communication, and be able to communicate to stakeholders, are all traits that make a great technical program manager.
Yeah, I think one question that people often bring up to me is like, okay, how much your day to day covers literally coding? Because for computer science engineers, they do want like
Mhm.
a role which is heavy on coding, but there might be others who, like you, who have done a com science degree, but might want kind of like a mix and a balance, which seems like your role. So yeah, but in your day, how much does it involve like coding and how much is more on other things?
Yeah, so I can speak to both careers that I've had, both at Google and at Microsoft. Both have a level of expectation that you are technically savvy. However, at neither company have I actually coded,
Mhm.
and that's not my job, right? That's the job of the software engineers. That's the job
Yeah.
of the team who has the training. They go through, once you're hired, they go through extensive amount of training on the code base, on this code stack, as well. And so that's really the job of the people who are trained for that. So I have not coded for a very, very long time. I do side projects. I do make sure I keep up with my technical skills, because that's just something that I'm passionate about.
Mm.
Um, but in a day-to-day job, my technical abilities are to bring kind of voice of reason to the room, to make sure we're all on the same page. And a lot of that is a part of my technical abilities. And it's not to say that I don't do technical things. We absolutely do technical things. And so while it's not coding per se, we are absolutely using code to create dashboards. I'm using, SQL. I'm creating queries and things like that. I'm bringing up analytics into the room to maybe assess whether a feature is successful or not. I am definitely building platforms, and I've done that for both careers. Especially at Microsoft, I was building a lot of platforms, showing the developers and trying to convince stakeholders as well
Mm.
that whether we should go with a project or we should not go with a project.
Yeah.
So definitely those aspects of technical kind of skills are in play in a job like this.
Yeah, I think thanks for clarifying that, because often when people hear technical skills, immediately the mind goes, oh, it's coding, right?
Yep.
So so as part of the interview process, like right, like both at Microsoft and Google, how do you think they kind of test your technical skills? I mean, if it's not, is it like a coding whiteboard round, or if you can share anything
Mhm.
around that?
Yeah, so none of my interviews have been full on coding. I have done some pseudocode in interviews, and sometimes you'll get questions like that. But a lot of the times, as a technical programmer, you'll get program manager, you'll get questions that are more system design based in nature. So, can you draw out for me the architecture behind something?
Okay.
So, the architecture behind an API, for example. So
Hmm.
those are the kind of questions that you'll get because they want to know you have the foundation to know how things connect, right? Like you have databases, you're able to read and write from the database.
Hmm.
Things like that is what they're really looking for. Is that do you have an understanding of how systems connect, and you're able to design architecture based off of that. And a lot of the times, the questions also it's our job in the room to ask the right questions. Are we building the right things for our customers? Are customers finding the right value out of things, or will they find the right value out of things? So in interviews, you'll often get questions like that, where you need to ask additional questions in order to solve the prompt for the
Hmm.
interview. So you need to be able to understand and ask the interviewer, who is my audience? Who am I developing for? Are there any accessibility constraints that I need to think about?
Hmm.
When I'm developing this product, what age range, what is my demographic of designing this product? So those are the questions I ask first before even getting into system design,
Hmm.
because designing a product for kids, as my team does at Google, is very, very different than designing a product
Yeah.
for adults. Um, and so in interviews, they will test that kind of knowledge. Is that, are you able to make sure that you fully know who your customer is, who your user is? And so that's what a technical interview kind of at these companies looks like.
Wow, this is amazing. So, for systems design, right? Like, are there some resources that you would recommend for people, who might have not had that background or who might not do this in their day to day, but do want to pivot in this field?
Yeah, I use a couple of resources. When I was interviewing at Google, I used Try Exponent. And they have really good videos on explaining what a system design interview is. They have a bunch of different questions that I use. You can use the framework and structure they have and
Hmm.
really implement it on any kind of system design question that you'll get in an interview. So Try Exponent was one of my resources. I also had downloaded the app Clubhouse. And Clubhouse is just people like you and I getting together in a room to chat
Hmm.
about things. And so I joined a couple of chats that had technical recruiters in that chat. And so every Thursday they would go live. They would pick random people from the audience, ask questions. You would answer the question. And then they tell you what you did well on and how you could do better. So before I was preparing for my interviews with Google, I definitely joined a lot of those chat rooms and raised my hand to answer questions. And those technical recruiters gave me such great advice. So definitely getting hands-on advice from people through Clubhouse is a great resource. As well as Supreet, you and I met through LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, just connecting with people on LinkedIn
Yeah.
is the best resource to say, hey, like I am currently in the interview phase right now. If you have any tips for me on resources that I should study, I'm more than willing to help out people and give them the same resources that I use to study for these interviews and practice. And the key word here in all of what I'm saying is practice, practice, practice. You'll get better and better with each interview. But if you practice with individuals that have gone through this before, it's going to make it much easier, and they're going to be able to give you feedback, and that you'll be able to translate into the actual interview.
Yeah, wow, that's so nice. And I think Clubhouse, I mean, even I use Clubhouse, but I
Yeah.
never knew that, you could use it for this purpose as well. So that's quite enlightening. I think thank you for sharing that. That will be helpful for a lot of people, a lot of our audience. So yeah, so I think you've already covered, right, the top skills to become a TPM. And then for people like I think most of the people who do want to transition from this field, they might be either a data scientist or a data engineer, or at least the queries that I got from people was, they are doing something completely different, right? Like they're ML heavy, AI heavy, but now they might want to transition in the TPM. Do you see that there is kind of a role, or maybe a team that as a TPM, those skills can get married together, the AI skills and also kind of your business skills that you might develop on the job?
Yeah, 100%. So I actually, my journey to getting into a TPM or even PM role, of my first role at Microsoft as a PM, was actually really interesting. So I mentioned I have that background in computer science and I have that MBA. But all of my internships in college, I did full stack development. So all I
Okay.
ever knew was the technical side of things. I didn't know what a program manager did until my first day at my first job in Microsoft. Did I learn what a technical program manager or program manager did? And so even when I was interviewing at Microsoft, my first interview was for a technical software developer interview. And in the
Okay.
middle of my interviewer looked at my resume and she asked me, she was like, "Oh, hey, you have a business degree. Would you want to switch the existing interview to a PM interview?" And I said yes, because I had wanted to be a PM, but I thought I'd had to go into software development track first and
Yeah.
then transition to be a program manager. And she said no. And in the middle of our interview, she transitioned the questions into system design type questions. And so even in that kind of example, like you can switch very quickly into whatever technical field you are into a PM position. Um, and honestly, I didn't know what it meant to be a PM before I started. And so if someone is looking to switch a career or pivot into this field, definitely I think you just have to have the communication skills. That's very big in our field. And you just have to have the knowledge and passion and drive. A lot of the learning comes on the job, but if this is something that you want to do and you're very passionate about organizing people together, organizing technical projects together, making sure things happen on time and communicating to stakeholders what's going on, then absolutely this is the field for you. And having that technical foundation just 100% aids in this field. So anyone that's trying to transition from AI, ML type of sectors, or even cybersecurity sectors. Like there are program managers for every single sector or field that you're in technical field, and absolutely that will definitely help in the process of becoming a program manager.
Wow, definitely. So you gave, I think, interview, obviously went through an interview process at
Yeah.
Microsoft for a program manager and then at Google. So how do you think like the role at Microsoft kind of prepared you for the role at Google? Like what are kind of the similarities and differences that you saw? Um, one in terms of your interview process and second in terms of your day-to-day job.
Yeah. So at Microsoft, as a program manager, I was doing everything that was associated with the project. So I was developing the 5-year vision of the project. I was hands in with the technical team on the day to day, on joining in on their sprints, joining in on their daily stand ups, and making sure that everything was on task. I was also working with the UX designers, or sometimes I was the UX designer on my team as well, working and creating UX files in Figma. And so at Microsoft, I was everything to the entire team. Um, and then so that's a lot, right? It's a great training, but it is a lot to be multiple different roles all at once in a
Yeah.
single role. So I think since I've left Microsoft, I know Microsoft has transitioned the program manager role a little bit more, to be a little bit more siloed and focused on working with the engineers, working with the technical teams to really hone in on the project and focus and scope out the role for that. But my experience when I was a technical program manager, or when I was a program manager at Microsoft, I was doing a little bit of everything for everyone. I was working with compliance folks. I was working with our legal folks, to make sure we were, legally we were able to good to go before our global launch. Whereas in Google, when I joined Google, I didn't realize it's very siloed environment, and it's very good that it's siloed environment. So I am a technical program manager, but I have a product manager that I work with. So my product manager is a person who's defining the features. They're defining the 5-year vision or what is next to come in the product. Then they hand it over to me and the engineering teams, to go and execute that vision and execute the different features that are going on there. And then we work with a whole separate team of UX researchers, UX designers, who will mock all of this for us and be able for us to actually visualize and see what's going on. And then we have our technical program manager team that actually does the day-to-day operations with our engineers, making sure we're on track, raising any issues, unblocking where need be. We have a whole separate legal team and then a whole team of engineers. So my job is very siloed, and very structured in what I need to do, what are my responsibilities, and
Right.
who are my cross team partners to be able to help me, and aid in our project. So those are the two differences, and absolutely my role at Microsoft helped, when I was prepping for interviews at Google. I had a very strong technical foundation at Microsoft. I think both companies always encourage that. Both companies always encourage things like day of learning, where you spend an entire day dedicated towards learning something new. And so a lot of the technical skills that I had learned at Microsoft, I was very easily able to translate over to my interviews at Google, with the help of the resources that I mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely having experience first helped me transition into the role better.
Wow. So, and also in terms of interview, I know you said that there were questions like systems design, I think, that were asked in both the
Mhm.
interviews. Was there anything else that, was kind of common, or, what was different in terms of the interview process?
Yeah, I think in terms of common, most times, even when I interview people myself, I interview for my team as well. I think the one of the most, besides technical aspect, which we touched on already, one of the things that people look at the most is, would I enjoy working with this person on my team? So really, it's the first impressions when you go through an interview. A lot of times, people are assessing your answers based off of, if they had to make a technical judgment based off of their answer, is that some person that I would want on my team? Would I want to directly work with that kind of person on my team? And so a lot of times the similarities, when interviewing with both teams, was that, do you really fit in with the team dynamic? And so a lot of times teams are very flexible. Projects change, charters change. And if you're someone in your interview that said, hey, I like structure, I like rigidity, I like to know exactly what I'm doing, complete that task, and then be done with it. A lot of times that's what people are assessing for, that, hey, you might not be a good fit for our team because our team is always evolving and we don't have that rigidity. There's a lot of unknowns at all times.
Right.
And so that's what a lot of times interviewers are assessing for, apart from the technical component, is that, can you fit in with the team? And even at Google, there is a criteria of Googliness. Is that, do you exhibit the qualities that a good Google employee would have? And in the Googliness component, do you act with authenticity, act with integrity? Those are the kind of things that, not only Google but Microsoft as well, are going to ask you and ask different questions that lead to answering that Googliness question. Um, and then differences is very little differences. I think both companies, I was on both sides of the platform. At Microsoft, I also interviewed candidates, and I was once interviewing myself as well. Differences are very minimal. But I think in Microsoft, I definitely was more technical in nature because that was my first job, and I had asked for a very technical interview. Whereas Google, I was given two options. I was actually given the option of either a coding interview or a system design interview. And I chose for a system design interview. So I didn't really have any pseudocode or anything like that, even in my Google interview. So that's something I didn't know until I was given the option, until my recruiter reached out and said, and I was in the middle of Google's interview process, is that they give you the option of which one you want to do.
Oh, okay. Wow. So I think one question that kind of everyone asks me is, okay, how did you land a job in Google? Like, was it through applying? Was it through networking? Was it? I think people are curious, right? Because there's so many ways of getting jobs, and some people, oh no, no, you shouldn't apply. You should just network. So, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's how anybody ever finds me is through LinkedIn. And I am so active on the platform. I used to be a lot more active than I am now, but I'm so active on LinkedIn, and I constantly, even to this day, have a bunch of recruiters reaching out to me from various different companies. But that is exactly how recruiters find me. It is through LinkedIn, is through really developing my profile, and really developing and talking about the skills that I have, talking about what I am passionate about. And so a lot of times I talked about cloud services. And that was something that I was very passionate about for a very long time. And so when I'd create posts and create hashtags and stuff, recruiters would see that, and then they would reach out to me and ask me if I was interested in changing positions. And so that's exactly how it started out with Google as well, is that a recruiter found me, and then they somehow found a resume that I had submitted years and years and years ago, and so they were able to contact me through my email that way as well. And so a lot of times when I have found an opportunity, or opportunities usually came my way, was through LinkedIn, and it was also through networking with other people. Um, so I have a lot of people in my LinkedIn connections who say, "Hey, like, can you, here's my resume. Can you help me? If you know of any recruiters that are hiring for this kind of position." And oftentimes, because I'm not looking for a job change right now, what I'll do is that if we're chatting and I see them as a good candidate, I'll also hand their resume over to recruiters who reach out to me personally. So a lot of times, networking with people is kind of the best way that you're going to ever be able to find a job. Is connecting with those recruiters one on one, or connecting with somebody who has good relationships with a lot of recruiters. And it's so true. It's so cliche, what they say. It's not what you know, but who you know that will get you your first opportunity or your next opportunity. And it's so true. Just from my experience, it's very, very true. In today's social media, digital connectivity age, it's truer than ever. So I think that's really how I've been able to find different opportunities for myself and different opportunities for other people as well.
Yeah. I think I was expecting some answer around those lines. So thank you for confirming that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think for all the users out there, as part of
Mhm.
Databuzz, we do provide mentorship to people, who kind of ask me, right, like, how should we get our first job? How should we get our second job? How should we pivot? So here is the answer, that Mansi gave. That's the perfect answer that anyone should follow. And I think Microsoft was your first job after your bachelor's and master's.
Yeah, it was my first full-time job. So yeah, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never
Yeah.
interned with Microsoft before. Um, Also, yeah, speaking of internships, I think one of the best ways to get in, a lot of times people ask me, how can I get into one of these large tech companies? Um, they predominantly hire through their internship pool. So if you're able to start out early doing internships, 1000% recommended. And so that's how, actually, I didn't go through any internship processes with any of the companies that I'm currently with, but I know a majority of my friends, a majority of my colleagues who are either at Google or at Microsoft, they all, a lot of them started out as interns. They started out as being able to drive small projects, prove to the team that they're capable of doing small technical projects, and then they were hired on as full time. So besides networking, the question you asked me was previously is how else can I get um, actively involved in some of these companies is through internships as well. And I think it's much easier trying to get internships than full time roles because you have a lot of people forgiving mistakes.
Yeah.
And so you're able to kind of make mistakes, you're able to learn and bounce back very quickly in the course of an internship. Whereas coming to one of these large tech companies, without interning, it's a lot of unknowns, a lot of times imposter syndrome can
Yeah.
creep in. And so definitely getting internships while you're in college, even high school. I did internships in high school as well.
Oh,
So getting that foundational experience will definitely be very helpful.
wow. So, did you also land the role at Microsoft through LinkedIn, or was it different? Your first role?
Um, No, actually, that's a fantastic question because other ways that you can land jobs like this at companies are through conferences. And it is not talked about enough. And when I actually graduated college, I graduated in 2019. I actually had 13 job offers, and seven of them were through conferences. So I attended Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing my junior year. So you definitely want to attend these conferences a year before you graduate. Um, but there it used to be in person, so it's much easier than it is right now. But there I was able to interview with so many companies at once, and I was able to talk to hundreds of companies at once in the prime time that I was trying to get my first job. So Microsoft actually was something where I had gone to the booth at Microsoft during one of these conferences,
Hmm.
and I was able to chat with some of the recruiters right there. They grabbed my resume and then they contacted me um, right there, then and there during Grace Hopper conference to do interviews. And that's actually how, as I mentioned, I got 7 interviews with different companies during those kind of conferences as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I reiterate because when I was pursuing my masters, I wanted to attend the conferences, but something or the other came up, and I wasn't able to do it.
Mhm.
But then later on, now when I go to the conferences as a speaker, I realize that there are companies that want to hire you, and they're actively looking. If you're just there, there is the opportunity to grab. So definitely,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think thank you for reiterating that. So I think there was a challenge that you mentioned of the challenge of the unknowns, in your first job, and then I think whenever
Mhm.
you switch jobs, right? Like some challenges do remain. So are there any other challenges that you faced in the journey, and any kind of tips and tricks on how you can go around them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched on this very, very briefly.
Yeah,
But tackling imposter syndrome is one of the hardest things I constantly face. And
yeah,
not only do I face it, but I speak with VPs and they're facing it as well. So I don't think it ever really goes away, but you learn different coping mechanisms, you learn different skills to really reduce the anxiety that comes with that. So when I first joined Microsoft, I constantly asked myself, do I even belong here? Even
mm,
after I got promoted, I got my first promotion. 4 months in, I told that I had gotten the promotion, and 2 months after that, I actually got the physical promotion. So even after my promotion, such early on in my career, I constantly ask myself, do I deserve this? Like,
Mm,
will someone know I don't belong here?
mm,
And so that's one of the biggest challenges that you constantly face. When I was interviewing for Google, I didn't even know if I could pass a single interview, let alone negotiate for a higher role. And so I actually, during my interviews, I did 4 interviews. And then two more after that, to do basically leveling interviews. So I passed 4 rounds of interviews, and then I had my who would have been my manager at Google. She had said, "Hey, like you should come in at a higher role because you have experience from Microsoft." So then I did another round of 4 interviews to negotiate for a higher level, a higher role coming in at Google. So you are more capable than you think you are, and you know more than you think you do.
yeah,
So really projecting the confidence, truly believing that you are where you are meant to be, and you're ready for the first step or even the next step in your career is something that is very difficult to do, but it's
yeah,
very, very important. So I also want to make sure some of the challenges that I have is that I want to make sure I stay technical. A lot of times we touched on that I don't necessarily code in my day-to-day job, but I'm constantly trying to stay technical. I'm constantly trying to be updated within my field of work that I do with kids, right? Be updated with the different compliances and regulations that are coming around kids, being updated with researching what are kids doing these days with their devices. So staying technical is one of the challenges that I currently face, but I'm constantly trying to do side projects, certification courses, or just general learning courses to make sure that I keep up with that side. And more importantly, I think of anything, the challenge is that if I am not passionate about something, then I lose the drive to do it. So constantly trying to make sure I find my passion, or if I'm in my current existing role that I'm passionate about, make sure I develop new skills or new things and find new passions along the way as well.
yeah. I mean, I was about to ask, right? Like, how do you upskill yourself? Because in this field of technology, things are so fast paced. Like everything is changing, and just to be like one of the best in your role, you do need to know what's happening, right? And
Mhm.
again, but that again, I think goes hand in hand with your passion. If you're not passionate enough, you might not be able to pursue it. So yeah, that's
Exactly.
the next question. Like, how do you upskill yourself? But thank you for covering that.
Yeah, but I think along with that, like, you can be a program manager in any field, but passion is what's going to drive you to be a really good program manager or even a technical program manager. So I'll be very honest, like, I wasn't looking to change outside of Microsoft, but I said if I leave such a good company for an equally as great company, it has to be for the product, it has to be that the work that I do fulfills me. And so I said no to 5 other teams at Google before I said yes to my existing team. And I was interviewed by multiple teams during the team matching process. But I wasn't passionate about that. And I didn't want to leave unless um, to my core, I would only leave if I was developing products that helped individual people live their lives better. And so don't settle for that. I know sometimes, you're just like, I just want to get into Google. I just want to get into Microsoft. I just want to get into these large companies. But you're not going to have a good experience with these large companies unless you're doing something that you are passionate about. And you'll also see like promotions will come very quickly because people will see that passion in you. People will see that drive in you as well. That you have out of box thinking. You're implementing things that other people from other teams are looking at you to implement. And so that's definitely what's going to help you kind of set yourself apart from others, apart from just joining one of these companies.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, that's like your wow factor.
Yeah,
right
absolutely.
there. So I think one of the questions that we received prior to our conversation was that I want to ask you is, I know you touched upon personal branding a little bit on LinkedIn, right? You were
Mhm.
very active, but what are the tips and tricks that you want to give to people in terms of personal branding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it ties along with the conversation we just had around passion. Build a personal brand around something that you are passionate about, that you are truly passionate enough to educate yourself even further than the normal person would go. Passionate enough to be a teacher, be a leader in the industry, and that's where you should develop your personal brand. So one of the things I'm passionate about is education for the underrepresented kids in our community with for technology, and so that's something that I'm constantly talking about in all of my platforms. I'm constantly talking about, what is an internship available for this student in this area. I'm talking about things that I'm passionate about, and that is what is going to draw people to you, is people who have the same passions, who have the same type of skill sets that either they want to learn or they want to apply as well, that you've already done. So getting one step ahead of them and then teaching them what you did is going to help you develop your personal brand. um, Something else that I know is very up and coming is that, sometimes a lot of people say, well, I don't know what my personal brand is. I don't really know what I'm passionate about. Is a lot of times what I do is that I'll search hashtags about like what's trending, what is up and coming in the industry. So one of the things that I'm looking into is cybersecurity. And security in general is such an ever growing field. And
Yeah.
so, what I want to rebrand or continue to brand myself around is someone who is going to be an expert around security field. And so, because I want that is my goal, I'm taking direct steps right now to do certification courses, to do LinkedIn learning courses. Um, and speak with experts in the industry right now that are at Google to try to understand the field better. And so you can always develop a brand as well. You can always change your brand as well. But what's going to attract people to your profile, what's going to attract people to you, is having something well established and being able to teach somebody that exact skill.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I think that's another thing that you touched upon, right? Yeah, that's kind of a burning question. When I talk about personal branding as well, they're like, okay, we don't know what we are passionate about. But I
Yeah.
feel like you don't have to like be working in that field or, be doing something in and out to be kind of building a personal brand around that, right? You can take certifications, you can read about it, you can talk to people and develop your personal brand around that topic. As you said, cybersecurity, which I think is very different from what you do
Yeah.
in your day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I think if you just have a hint that, hey, like this is something that interests me,
yeah,
then you're able to dive deeper and deeper into it. But you have to have that initial interest, initial attraction to
right.
specific topics or things before.
Awesome, amazing. And what is there anything that, or if you can share anything outside Google, that you do to engage and follow your passion?
Yeah, so I talked about how I'm passionate about ensuring that there's diversity in recruitment in the technical field. So at University of Cincinnati, I helped develop a pipeline program for inner city students starting sixth grade up until 12th grade to learn how to code. A lot of times, kids in inner cities, if they get to college, a lot of times they don't get to college. If they get to college, their classmates are much more advanced than they are in technical skills, and they're disadvantaged just because of where they grew up. They didn't have opportunities or resources to take coding classes before their first day of college classes, and so for them the imposter syndrome is tenfold because you didn't have any experience. And so outside of Google, I translated that over here to the Seattle area, is that I volunteer with organizations that help underprivileged or underrepresented students who are interested in technology get into this field. And so a lot of times what I do is I'll go into classrooms and teach a couple of lessons or exercises, and just share that knowledge, share with them that this is the field for them, that they can be successful, demystify some of the myths that are in this field. Like you had just asked me, didn't realize I didn't just need to code in order to be in the technical field.
Right.
To kind of demystify, make technical field less scary, make coding less scary for these students. And so those are the kind of activities and engagements and things that I'm heavily involved in outside of Google.
Wow, I think that's really impressive. It's all about giving back. So, like, you're doing an amazing job there. I think that's all from my side. I was also able to cover all the questions that we got from our audience prior to this.
Awesome.
There are a few people who wanted to be in here live with us, but they couldn't be due to multiple reasons. But we'll have this recording for them on our YouTube channel, so they can always access it, and for other people. So feel free to share it with your network as well. I think your answers were so enlightening, so on the point, and it'll be really helpful for anyone who wants to know what a TPM is and who wants to pivot in this field. So I really thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me the platform to share. A lot of times I think people are scared to reach out to someone like me because they're like, oh, this person works at Google, they're a technical program manager. Maybe they're too smart or too busy to reach out to me, and or for me to reach out to them, and for me to ask my questions too. So I appreciate you giving me this platform. And if anyone is listening and joining in, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at any time, and I'd be more than willing to help you all grow in your careers, because I got to where I am with a village of people who had helped me throughout my journey. So it's very important for me to give back, and make sure that my platform and my brand is a source of welcoming, mentoring, and giving opportunities as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.